Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Now, Africa is blessed with tourist sites and locations from the north, the south, the east, and the west. Nevertheless, with its beautiful scenery and rich cultural heritage, languages, people, and diversity, most persons, including Africans, have made foreign countries their destination hotspots. Now, as we mark Africa Day, we want to look at a few reasons why local tourism is not gaining the prominence as it should, and how can it be revived following the huge impact COVID-19 has had on hospitality and tourism sector. Bear in mind that Africa is the world's second largest and second most populous continent after Asia in both cases. Now, joining us this morning to talk about reviving the tourism sector in Africa amidst the pandemic is Efetobo Awana, as the convener, Nigeria Tourism Awards and Nigeria Travel Week. Good morning, Mr. Awana. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Pretty interesting conversations, and of course, we're just hearing this morning in part of the news that there might just be another COVID-19 outbreak or pandemic. So it's scary for travelers, for tourists and the likes, and of course for Africa. But let's talk generally about tourism in Africa. Why do you think it's not getting the attention that it should have?
Africa. This is it's so sad because we are actually about the most beautiful continent that you can find. When you look at the natural beauty, of the continent, and you look at the diversity in terms of culture and all of that, it was so much of a beautiful people and a continent. However, I think our biggest problem has to do with deliberate marketing. So tourism is show business. For us to get the most from tourism, we have to deliberately market the continent as a go-to destination. Every other continent in the world, countries in all the other continents do aggressive marketing, and you naturally fall in love with these countries. Sometimes when you travel to some of these destinations that we all love to go to, you find out, whoa, this
is not exactly
all that,
what you saw on the screen.
Said. So,
yes.
And then somehow we have chosen to also propagate our bad news. The Western world shows you only their good side, or at least more of their good side. And like I said, because it's show business, you want people to see the best about you. When you look at the insecurity, for example, in the US, look at all of the gun issues that they've been having recently. Imagine that was happening on the continent of Africa and how it would be blown out of proportion. We'll be so happy to spread all of this news, but then what do we do to our continent? So it has to be deliberate. We have to tell ourselves as a people that we must show our beautiful side. We must get the people on the continent to get to experience other parts of the continent, because that's the only way we can share wealth, amongst ourselves.
So we generally need to do better with publicity in that regard,
Basically.
And take advantage of the media organizations that exist across Africa, social media. There's so many of these channels that are available to put out better publicity, with regards to Africa. I want you to expand a little bit more on insecurity, like you just spoke about. How much damage has that done to the tourism sector in Africa, and people who want to travel to Africa?
So for me, I think that's the biggest excuse that we've always had, because when you look at the statistics, insecurity on the continent and other parts of the world, you find out that people are doing just fine, even with these issues. So, and then it's also a vicious circle. Tourism, for example, is one of the biggest employers of labor. So it means that once you take care of tourism, then you take a lot more people out of that circle where they are more likely to be prone to get involved in crime and vice.
Yes.
But then look at, I don't want to mention countries for sake of the marketing them, but when you Google, for example, the murder capital of the world, or the most dangerous cities in the world, you find some of these cities and countries around the world out of Africa that have higher crime rates. But then also check tourism receipts. They make a lot more money from tourism. So it tells you that, yes, you could have these problems, but you could also do well with tourism. Okay. So in one way, whilst you tackle the issue of tourism, of letting people know the beauty of your country or your continent, for example, you're reducing the chances that you have people who will be poor, unemployed, who could get into crime. Because in the first place, imagine, let's use the instance of Rwanda, for example. There's a beautiful model that they have around their gorilla tracking. So they charge about $1,500 just to see one gorilla. You're not taking the gorilla away. It's not.
Just
you're
to
just
see
going
it.
to probably take selfies with the gorilla. And you go and you go away. That's about 800,000 naira for one gorilla. We have gorillas in Nigeria, but we'll not talk about that.
All right.
Now,
I just before you continue, because it's a very, very vast conversation. But I want to bring someone who is very, very enthusiastic and excited about travel across Africa, Oliver Modi. She's also, of course, going to join this conversation.
Thank you very much, Osalge and Efatobo. I'm having a great time actually being a part of this conversation, and I think it's important that we talk about local tourism. Now, Efatobo, what would you say we can do to encourage inter-travel, inter-country travel, as well as intercontinental travel, or rather intra-continental travel? And I'm asking this because we see a lot of people who want to go on holidays, and they're thinking of going to the Western countries, thinking of going to Europe. How can we encourage more people to look at traveling within Africa as well as traveling within the African countries?
So there has to be deliberate marketing and also deliberate policy. So every country has to choose to want to attract tourists and make it easier for tourists to visit. The African continent, for example, has some of the most difficult visa regimes around the world. So why is it so difficult for me, for example, to visit a country in Southern Africa or in North Africa? When it's easier for me to visit the UAE, for example, I can get my visas in 24 hours. We must make it a lot easier. We must take away all of those things that make it a lot more expensive. For example, on the continent, we have some of the most expensive taxis, aviation taxis and all of those that make our flight tickets more expensive. So when you're traveling around the continent, for example, is a lot more expensive than when you're traveling probably twice or three times that same distance to somewhere else in the world. So we must deliberately choose to make these things cheaper. We must deliberately choose to market to the continent, to get Africans to travel Africa. We must deliberately introduce policies that makes it easier for Africans to also be able to visit. Perhaps do country hopping. When you look at West Africa, for example, you can probably visit 5 countries in one day. Say Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire, because these are countries that are just so close to each other and share so much in common. But then how do we encourage, how do we make it easier for you to have one visa and then drive across or hop across these destinations, just the way we have them, say, in the Schengen area or in other parts of the world. So there has to be deliberate work and marketing for the continent.
Okay, and I like that you've mentioned this. I want to ask, do you see a future where a Nigerian or a Kenyan or a Zimbabwean can wake up one day and travel to any country in Africa without a visa? We did see a tweet shared at the start of the year where a Nigerian citizen had shared her experience traveling to another African country and being turned back. She didn't even get to enter into the African country. So do we see a future where every African can travel within Africa without any borders or without as much difficulty as we experience now?
Yes, I do believe that in the near future that we'll be able to do that. There's so much work going on behind the scenes at the moment. I mean, there's all of the talk about the African passport. There's all of the talk about, after, making it a lot easier for Africans to be able to travel around. But we have to do a lot more than, just talking about these things and aggressively pursue this. And then more beyond that, also sensitize Africans on their own. So Africans are not aware of other Africans. Just like the way a typical American is so very ignorant of the rest of the world. And that's the way we are, about our continent, which should not be. So if we do some work in this regard, very, very soon, we'll be able to travel around our continent without hassle.
You also recently hosted the Nigerian Tourism Award, so give us a little bit about that, and also talk about tourism in Nigeria. It doesn't seem like there's a lot going on here.
Nigeria Tourism Awards. So for us, that's always the highlight of the year for us, where we take time to recognize and celebrate and honor those who are outstanding in tourism in Nigeria. We realize that for tourism to thrive, we need to be able to raise standards. And there's no way you raise standards without, honoring those who are doing well. And that's what we do with Nigeria Tourism Awards, which, held some days back in Lagos. And what we did was to recognize individuals, tourism brands. We had awards for best hotel, we had an award, for example. My most interesting one was for tourism investment, which went to Chief Michael Adeojo of Elizade. For me, that was important because we need more Nigerians to invest in tourism. Yeah. One of the biggest problems we have is that we don't have that much funding for tourism. For the rest of the world, you have banks that are dedicated to tourism. You have individuals who massively invest. We have the people, we have the resources, but yet people do not choose to invest in tourism in Nigeria. And that's why we have to continue to recognize those who do this and encourage others to see that tourism is indeed a gold mine. Of course, when you look at some of the challenges we face in Nigeria, you find that tourism is the lowest hanging fruit for us to be able to, solve some of these problems. Absolutely. Talk about social integration, talk about insecurity, talk about employment. Tourism will help us solve this.
It's been a very interesting conversation, Efatobo, and of course we hope that some of these things eventually come into play. And of course, just to also mention, it's Africa Day, and it's okay to save some money and do a trip to some African country before the end of the year.